Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
How was partying it up last week?
Bro, when I listened back to the episode, I don't remember what you said I was probably doing, but I started dying.
Burning down a rival nightclub.
That was funny. Yeah, I've only been working. It's been Garbo, but I'm a third of the way done of my training for this new job. So,
Nice.
yeah.
That's what you say, anyways.
Right.
The audience will decide if you're telling the truth. Well, let's talk Dune here, man.
Let's do it.
The audience has been waiting for this one. Maybe not. I don't know. I haven't talked to anybody about it, but it seems like a big thing going on.
Yeah.
Seeing a lot of stuff making the rounds about the new Dune movie and all the actions and stuff.
Right.
We've both seen it. Did you? I'm assuming you saw part one before you went to the new one.
So get this. I was supposed to, and I turned it on, and I fell asleep and probably watched a total of 20 minutes of it. It
All
was
right.
one of the most boring movies I ever saw in my entire life.
Yeah, and so you virtually had very little idea what was going on in the second movie.
Well, so I did like a quick little reading up on it just to kind of like
Yeah,
get the
yeah, yeah.
gist, and I felt like I followed along perfectly with what was going on. Like it was
Okay.
not hard to pick up or anything, honestly.
As long as you kind of had known what the main point was.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, let's do some pre spoilers review of this second part here before we really talk about our thoughts on everything.
Yeah.
Because you kind of mentioned that the first one was extremely boring,
Yeah.
and I will agree with that. I think watching the first one, you're like, why is this movie 2.5 hours?
Right.
And in your reading, you can tell me if you disagree, but like everything in the first movie was just dragged out way too long. Like
Hmm.
it could have literally been condensed into an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute movie because of just how long they were virtually doing nothing in the first film.
Yeah.
And there's some cool concepts for what's going on, and like definitely some important stuff that you do need to know for the second movie,
Hmm.
but like did not need to be like
As long as it was.
oh yeah, 100%. And
Yeah.
I mean, so I'll say for me watching the first film and this new one, the concept of the movies reminds me a lot of like Greek tragedy
Hmm.
kind of style of movie or plot or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Which I think is super intriguing because it's like obviously it's like sci-fi as well. So it's like if
Hmm.
you took like this Shakespearean style or these old tragedies and plays from old times and made it like a modern sci-fi action film.
Yeah.
That's kind of what Dune is to me, and I think it's a really cool concept. But the first one was so long and so boring, and so I
Yeah.
was really worried about that going into the second one. Like, are we going to get the same thing? And I'll say the second one is way more entertaining and way more exciting to watch. Like, you're not dying throughout it,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'll still say it felt way too long for what I got out of the
Hmm.
film. Like,
Yeah.
I think because it seems like I don't know how many more parts there are. Like, if
So
they're doing a third part or a fourth or whatever.
I heard because these movies are based off of the books,
Mhm.
that I mean if I'm correct, I heard that there were six books. I would assume that if the movies keep doing as well as they have been, then I don't see why they wouldn't make six unless they kind of like
Are blending some of them.
yeah, right. And I mean, honestly, like I wouldn't mind that. After seeing the second one, I really wouldn't mind that. The first one, after watching, I was very hesitant about seeing the second one. I saw it with two of my friends, and I had bought tickets before even seeing the first one, so I was already locked
Yeah,
in. And so yeah, watching that first one, I was like, "Oh my gosh, can anything happen right now? Because this is stupid."
yeah,
Fell asleep during all of it, and I was like, "That was one of the best naps of my life."
right.
It just seemed very long, very boring, like we've already said, and just I don't know how anybody was really intrigued by what the heck was going on. And yeah, I heard that that movie did great numbers when it first came out, so good on them.
Right.
Everybody was telling me that this was the filler movie. And so in my mind, I was like, how are you going to make your first movie like your filler, like only information? And that just doesn't seem
Yeah.
like it works. But here we are, and it worked out very well. But yeah, going into the second one, very hesitant and came out thoroughly pleased.
Yeah,
So
it was a very solid film. I understand why it's getting a lot of traction and a lot of popularity.
yeah.
I think it deserves a good amount of that. But overall, I'll agree with you. Is a pretty enjoyable watch. I think my final thought before we get into spoilers is I think that I'll still stand by it. I think depending on what this third movie puts out, I think you could have made one 3 hour movie,
Hmm.
like one lengthy movie, and just packed it all in there. Or if you feel like you need a little bit more time, they should have been like an hour and a half each, because I still think there was too much in this second film that was just like, all right, we get it. We've been here in this scene for like 10 minutes. Let's move on.
Right.
Let's like let's
Yeah.
go somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Like the and I'll kind of piggyback for my last thought. Like I do agree. There were a couple parts where I was like, man, this movie is still going on. Like this is a long movie. But at the same time, and this is my personal opinion, I was very okay with the entirety of it. Like I didn't feel like, okay, like why didn't you just, stop it here and like wait till the third? Or why didn't you, as you were saying, make one very big movie? I liked it for how long it was, for what was going on, what they gave us. I was very okay with. And maybe that's because I got nothing out of the first one. So seeing an entire movie where I got
yeah,
everything that I needed, that might be
right.
part of it, but I was very okay with it.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, for audience that hasn't seen the film yet, if you don't want these spoilers for Dune Part Two, go ahead and jump off and rejoin this episode after you've seen it.
Right.
But let's get into some of our categories here for
One
our
sec.
movie going
One sec,
experience.
real quick. Hey, if you can hear me, we are going over Dune 2. So you either put headphones in, maybe don't listen all the way, but there's a chance that not a chance. We'll be discussing spoilers. So just so
Jaden
you're
Jaden
aware.
is Jaden is echoing our warning to his roommates right now.
He's going to see it on Tuesday, so I didn't want to be a jerk. Had to give him the
You
head
should
up.
have just ruined the entire viewing experience for him right now. No, it's
What a bad.
that's a good man. A good man does
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
Let's talk plot here.
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, I think the plot develops a lot more in this one.
Mhm.
You actually see things going somewhere as opposed to just like everything being a setup. First of all, let's jump back to this Instagram comment that we got like 3 months ago, where someone told us that Spider Verse, like Across the Spider Verse, was the same as Dune One.
Uh-huh.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Go home.
I
You're an
forgot
idiot.
that was a
That's the
thing.
worst take I've ever heard after I saw Dune Part One. I was like, what?
I forgot about that.
anyways, anyways,
That's comedy.
let's talk plot here. What do
Yeah.
you think of the
Man,
second part?
so going off the number scale, I'll put my number out there. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Um this probably, like I said before, has something to do with how much I did not enjoy the first one. So seeing the second one, seeing how I don't remember any of the characters' names. How Timothy Chalamet's character, how he's supposed to be this like messiah, but he doesn't really want to. He's not buying into that. He just wants to be like a good person, like trying to help the world and all of this stuff going into, you know, the ending to where he finally just kind of takes up that role and like leads
Right.
these people. Um I think it was very well done. I think how they built everything up was a good pace. I thought it was a great direction. I liked seeing, him getting accepted by I'm gonna call them the Sand People from Tatooine. Um like getting their trust and like becoming one of them and just all the way through until that kind of like war part where we see I don't even know what they're called, but those people, there's this entire war, just all of it I felt like was very well placed, very well timed, and it needed to be where it needed to be. So I gave it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly to you. I was a little more harsh on it at some points. I gave it a 7 though, because like I said, I really think the concept is quite intriguing. It does remind me in terms of the dynamics of the plot and the families and the culture interactions. It reminds me a lot of like a Greek tragedy or like a Shakespearean kind of style film. But like if you were to take that and make it, you know, sci-fi futuristic apocalyptic kind of style
Yeah.
film, which I think is a really cool concept for a plot. But in watching the second one, I really felt like this was kind of only decent. There was only a few parts that I felt like the plot was very compelling.
Mm.
Um, and I felt like they took what it seemed like should have been a side plot and made it a main plot and vice versa.
Mhm.
Because I think you're watching the entirety of this movie and it's all like, is Timothy Chalamet's character going to be like, is he actually like this kind of savior figure that they're talking about?
Right.
And that feels like more of like a minor plot kind of idea to me. And not that
Mm.
that's like a minor concept, but just like if that's the entirety of what your plot focuses on, that's basically the New Testament. Like, you know what I mean? Like that, like if you want to do that, like it's okay, but like that's kind of just the New Testament if that's all your movie is going through. But
That's funny.
if you're watching the film, like the real main plot is kind of the liberation of these Fremen people and
Mhm.
like how do they, get back to being free and how do they how does Timothy Chalamet get revenge for what how
Right.
the emperor betrayed his family and whatever. But those kinds of like things that I felt like should have been the main plot are kind of secondary throughout
Mm.
the film to like this whole dynamic of Timothy Chalamet's character, which like is kind of just a me thing, but I just felt like it kind of fell flat for me as a viewer because of its focus on these more quote unquote minor details.
Yeah.
Um, and I also kind of added into my factor here of how dragged out the plot felt at sometimes. And
Right.
like you're saying, I don't think it's things that I wish they would have cut out of the film. It's just things that I didn't think needed to be as long as they were.
Right.
Like
That's fair.
we've hit on this scene for 10-15 minutes now.
Yeah.
Let's spend 3-4 minutes and move on to something else. Like we've
Yeah.
been here for a while. Let's just move along. We kind of get what we're talking about at this point. So that was a 7 for me.
I feel it.
Um, and let's jump into the writing now. Dialogue and kind of just the overall writing of the film. What do you think?
Yeah, once again I gave it an 8. I liked how each character kind of reacted to one another, how they played off of each other. Um two of the main characters being Timothy and Zendaya, I think where their dialogue came in was really good. I liked the Emperor and just kind of I don't the other people. I don't know what they are, but just the dialogue between all of them trying to figure out like what their next steps are, the kind of behind the scenes of the nun lady talking to the daughter,
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I just think that everything. I don't know. I just thought it was cool. Plus, like the language that they had to learn, and then the just how they embodied like their language. And this kind of doesn't really just hit writing, but just how they embrace each character and um get into the role of these foreigners and Timothy like learning, that language because, Messiah and whatever. And I don't know. I just think everybody played off very well together. I think the script was very solid.
Yeah, I mean, I for sure was a lot more harsh on this section than you, though I'll agree. I think the use of the various languages in the film was kind of a cool addition, and I think those uh, add to the kind of cultural elements of the film in terms of interactions between their own culture versus the cultures around them. But I felt like what the dialogue and the writing of the film was really nothing to write home about.
Hmm.
Like I didn't feel like there was anything memorable in it. I didn't feel like there was anything that was really powerful. Like the most powerful moments you get in the film are Timothy Chalamet kind of just gets up and shouts a bunch of random stuff. And it's not even like anything cool. Like it's not like you're watching Gladiator and like these crazy powerful speeches that rally troops. It's just like he gets up and kind of shouts and then they're like, okay,
Yeah, that's fair.
let's just walk around for the next 5 minutes. So um I mean like I said, it wasn't egregious. It wasn't like bad writing, though I think
Yeah.
that there's a couple times there's some kind of cringy stuff where I was like, what the heck are like what are we doing? Like there's one scene when Zendaya walks past Timothy Chalamet's mom, Lady Jessica or whatever,
Hmm.
and she walks past her and then like really sassily like looks at her and is like, I would wish you good luck, but it looks like you've already won your battle, and walks out. And I was like, what the heck was that? What did I just see? Um, anyways, couple cringy parts like that,
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
overall, I gave it a 6 because I didn't think it was like detracted from the film, but I felt like it was kind of weak at times.
Yeah.
But let's get into what people are really talking about here in this film, which is the visuals, CGI, cinematography. What did you think about this?
I gave it a 7. Like I had it at an 8 for a little bit, but then the only reason I put it down to a 7 is just because when I'm thinking visuals, I'm also thinking of where they're at for the majority of the film. Are they like moving around? Kind of like how Star Wars, they're going to different planets, so you get to see various different places. This one, it's really like just sand. And so that's like the only dock that I really have from it. Other than that, I thought like those weird like worm creatures were like super crazy. Like those things cracked me up. I'm not even gonna lie. I was dying. I think the fighting scenes were some of the best that I've seen in a while. Like towards the end, you see that great hand-to-hand combat knife fighting scene between Timothy and whoever the other dude is. Um,
Elvis.
yeah, him. Wait, is that actually Elvis?
Yeah. Austin Butler.
I didn't know that. Dude,
You
he
never
killed it.
thought you'd
Hold
see
on.
Willy Wonka and Elvis sword fight each other in Dune Part Two, did you?
Nah, that's great. Hey, honestly, he killed it. Wow, good for
Yeah,
him. That's awesome. What the heck? I also liked the dynamic between um the other world. I don't know what it is, but where it was all black and white.
yeah,
I thought that was super cool. And then I guess the best visual in my opinion was in the end when the emperor came down and everybody's just kind of in one spot finally and war's breaking loose and they're like have this great strategy. And yeah, I
yeah,
thought I thought that was the best visually. And you can tell that they took a lot more time figuring everything out for that last, I don't know, like 30, 40 minutes, not that much, but 30 minutes at least.
Yeah.
Just getting everything developed how they wanted to. But yeah, the sand's really the only thing that docked it. It was just a lot of sand.
You're giving me some Anakin Skywalker vibes here.
Dude, that movie gave me a bunch of Tatooine vibes. Like, I feel like they took a little bit of inspiration from Star Wars. No, hold on. There was, when Timothy Chalamet was talking to the Empress's daughter, was like, and help me like take over this empire. I was like, that's Anakin. This is directly out of Star Wars. You're not fooling me.
Yeah, I think they take a lot of inspiration from other
Right,
sci-fi classics, as you do for sure.
right.
But for my thoughts on the visuals, I'm gonna disagree with you again here because I
Wow.
thought they were nearly flawless in this movie.
Wow.
I thought the CGI was fantastic
Mm,
for the most part. Like even just in terms of the little helicopter type deals they have, those little dragonfly looking things, like or
yeah.
the big spice miners, those were sick. They
Yeah.
looked really good. Um, I think the opening scene where it's kind of like during an eclipse, and so
Mm,
the cinematography is kind of a little hazy and darker, and
yeah.
it's changing in terms of the light at times, is super super cool. I
Yeah.
loved that aspect of it, and I will say it's for sure. You're for sure right that it does dwell on the sand for a ton of it. You're like, okay, another shot of sand. Um, and so that does factor into it a little bit for me, but because it looked so visually well done, I didn't really mind it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of other scenes where the way they approach even not just the scenic shots, but like the shots of characters' faces or arguments they have, they film it in a very intriguing and unique way. And I think that
Yeah.
was really cool. I really said that it was only kept from perfection because there's occasional CGI weaknesses.
Hmm.
Because you notice how good it is at other points, you're kind of like, this one's not quite as good. Like I
Yeah.
can see, this isn't quite what you did in the last scene. And I will agree with you. I think the fight at the end between Austin Butler and Timothy Chalamet was super well choreographed and filmed, but there were a couple of other fight sequences that I felt like were a little bit lazy, not in their choreography, but just in how they were filmed. It's kind
Hmm.
of like they just left the camera there and filmed like the whole scene just from the exact same standstill point.
Yeah.
And I felt like they could have done a little bit more with that. But I gave it a 9.5. I really liked the visuals in
Wow.
this one.
That's
I thought it
awesome.
was super, super good, nearly flawless, like I said. Um, anyways, let's get into our next section here on the audio. Big talk about the soundtrack here. I felt like Hans Zimmer just was cooking. I thought he did his thing. Uh, it was really I really did enjoy the soundtrack. There's a couple of parts that I'm already annoyed by,
Yeah.
just because of social media though, more than the film itself. I'm just
Right.
like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't need to hear some random Jeff screech out these Fremen lyrics that nobody knows what they're actually talking about. Like, we don't need to do that. Let's move
Carry
on.
on. Carry on.
Yeah, carry on. Um, while we're talking about the soundtrack, though, I think that in the first movie, did you see the scene in the first movie where they're getting ready for war and they're doing like the throat singing and the guy's like, "Ew, ew." Did you see that? Okay, never mind. There's some super funny memes going around about that I've seen lately. I'll have to share them with you. But
That-
anyways, I enjoyed the mixing and the dialogue of the movie as well. I think the characters' voices sounded good. You kind of
yeah.
it's very powerful in terms of like the sound effects and kind of that kind of thing. But I will say at some points the soundtrack and the special or the sound effects are a little too dominant.
Mhm.
Not in that like I mind a loud soundtrack or loud sound effects. I actually prefer if there's times in the movie where it does dominate and prevail.
Yeah.
But those will be happening, and then someone will like try to say something important in the middle of it, and I'm like, hold on, what
What'd
what
you
did he
say?
just say? like I can't just ask the theater operator to turn on subtitles because Hans Zimmer's got the soundtrack on 11. You know what I mean? So there were a couple things like that, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I really liked the way it sounded, even though I am kind of annoyed by all of what I'm hearing on social media already.
Yeah.
But I gave it a 9.
Wow. Yeah, another disagreement, and that's okay
Sure.
because it'd be really boring if it wasn't.
Yeah.
I gave it a 7. But a lot of that has to do with it's so hard for me to listen to soundtracks within movies unless it's like something like I'm already familiar with, or if I'm like, hold on, what is playing right now? Like this is kind of going crazy, and then it distracts me
Yep.
from the movie. Um, so it's very hard for me to pay attention to any kind of actual tracks going on. But
Yeah.
with the mixing and like sound effects, I think they were good. I do agree with the times where, you know, you can't really hear what people are saying. Um, but yeah, I feel like if I cared more about really trying to hear what's playing in the background, then it would change. But just based off of what I was actually paying attention to, it turned out to a 7.
For sure. For sure. Fair enough. To each their own.
Right.
It's interesting in these categories because we kind of hear what each other values in a movie going
Right.
experience. So it's
Yeah.
you can tell like where we get a lot of our factors from. But anyways, we talked about this next section a little bit already, but let's kind of dive into the characters and the acting here. Um, I think like we've talked about, there's a lot of standout. First of all, there's just a ton of big name actors in this film. Like everyone and their
Yeah.
dog decided to be in this one.
Literally.
Um, and I think it was the better for it. Like even Josh Brolin, who kind of has a minor role late in the film, still is a great performer. Uh, Florence Pugh, who kind of has a minor role as the Emperor's daughter, is also great. Um, to me, I think the standout performer was Austin Butler because
Mhm.
you watch him in like Elvis or whatever other stuff you see him in, and for me, like I know him as like the Disney Channel boyfriend from when I was a kid. Like if you look at his like filmography and what he was in, there's like 5 years in a row where he just plays a different Disney Channel character's boyfriend
Wow.
from like 2005 to like 2008. Like every year he just is in like a different show playing like the exact same role essentially.
That's
So
crazy.
like that's kind of what I knew him from as a little kid. And then seeing him in Elvis, I was like, okay, you know, he kind of like just became a more matured version of that, kind of like, you
Literally.
know, plays the king of rock, like this kind of suave entertainer guy.
Yeah.
And then he's in here and he's like
Oh
super
yeah,
creepy,
terrifying.
super aggressive and like deranged. And he kills the role. He's super good in it. Anyways, I think he was the standout performer. I did knock this category just a little bit because I felt like it was carried by the side actors. Like
That's
even
fair. Yeah.
Lady Jessica was a fantastic actress in this one. Um, Stilgar, the like head of the Fremen people,
Hmm.
was good. The Baron was good, kind of creepy, weird dude. Drax,
Right.
you know, Dave Bautista is always good in this role. Uh, but Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya, I felt like were the weakest performers.
Hmm.
Not to say that they were trash by any stretch,
Right.
but just compared to everybody else, I was like, you guys' performance is not up to like what everyone else in this film's doing. So I
Yeah.
did knock it a little bit because of that. But I gave it an 8. I think there's good character development. It kind of
Mhm.
takes you where it's supposed to in this setup film for the next one. So
Yeah. Yeah, we're a little closer here. I loved the characters. I gave it a 9. Um, I think I 100% agree with you. What's his name? Austin, what? Booker?
Butler,
Butler. Yeah, I agree. Easily the best part of the movie when it comes to character wise. Especially now knowing that that's Elvis, that's terrifying. Um, wasn't expecting that at all. I- oh yeah, it was incredible. He absolutely um just became that character and killed it. It kind of gave me Christian Bale vibes from Thor,
Oh
the
yeah,
fourth
love
one. Yeah. But anyways, I do think that Zendaya and Timothy were the weaker of the roles played. I do think that Timothy towards the end became a better like dominant main character. Like I think he actually started doing his thing as a main character, if that's what you want to say.
sure.
But 100% with the Zendaya, like she was just kind of there, like uh, just kind of like doing nothing for the most part. She had her moments where she was super cool and where she had to have whatever kind of conversations with Timothy, but yeah, 100% weakest. Yeah, I just think everybody gradually kept getting better throughout the entirety of the film. You see Dave's character um reach a different kind of like madness and like how upset he is and like kind of this
Yeah,
betrayal because like, oh, like you're just gonna replace me like that. Um, Especially because I'm used to seeing him, as Drax, where he's serious, but more often than not, he's the comic relief.
yeah,
Um, Lady, whatever her name is, I'm assuming that's the mom.
yeah.
Terrifying. She creeped the living crap out of me. She was so very scary. And then her little daughter inside of her was also terrifying. Didn't like any of that, but killed her role. Yeah, I gave it a 9. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah, I'll kind of wrap up the characters here by agreeing with a large portion of what you said about Timothy Chalamet's character, because I do think there's moments where he kind of steps into the role, and you're
Mhm.
like, okay, that was a pretty good showing.
Right.
For me, I just don't feel like he quite has the presence of what the of like the character they're trying to build,
Mm.
if that makes sense. They're trying to build him as like this leader and this figure of like power. And I get he's kind of supposed to be this 15-year-old kid that's young and not really proven, but he doesn't really have this presence about him or this demeanor that like makes me feel like he is what the character is, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like there's a lot of scenes where they're like looking up to him and they're like, "Oh, Lisa Gaib," and
Right.
they're like, praising him. And it's supposed to be like these super mega intense, like powerful scenes. And I'm like, he looks like Willy Wonka. He do, not just because he was, because he kind of looks a little fruity. Like
Right.
he's kind of like a young small guy, doesn't really have a lot of
Yeah.
presence to it. Like, anyways,
Yeah.
uh,
I
I'll
agree.
wrap that up just there because I
He's
that's
just
my 2 cents.
yeah, like I do agree. He's too small. He's pretty like, and this is no disrespect
Yeah,
to Timothy, like, but
yeah,
he's a very small build dude.
right,
Like, so it is hard to be, this character where you're supposed to be him
yeah,
and you look like you are a 15-year-old boy.
right. hmm
So, but
And I don't even think you need to be like massive. Like I don't think every main character needs to be Chris Hemsworth. You know
right.
what I mean? Like even and let's just pull from superhero examples because that's kind of like a similar-ish genre, like in
Hmm.
this sci-fi genre. But like Tom Holland is also a pretty small dude. Like he
Right.
he weighs like 150 pounds
Yeah.
soaking wet. But he has a presence about him in the Spider-Man films where you're like, this is the main dude. Like he's
Yeah.
he's the serious guy. Robert Pattinson in the Batman, literally Edward from Twilight, like this
Yeah.
skinny vampire dude, not by any stretch jacked or shredded in the Batman, but has like this main character presence where you're
Yeah.
like, this is like a figure. This is Bruce Wayne, like this big deal guy.
Right.
And I just don't think Timothy Chalamet quite has that quality to him, if that
Yeah.
makes
No, I
sense in
agree.
comparing him to those. Um, anyways, that's kind of our main categories here. Let's get into our overall enjoyment of the film. We've kind of touched on this throughout, but wrap this one up for me and let me know your thoughts overall.
Dude, I gave it a 10. The I was uh man, when I tell you I walked out of that theater just so happy that I actually went to go see this movie. I was blown away by the performances. Like, just like I said, there were moments where, I felt like, oh, this movie's still going on. Like, this is, but after I felt that way, there was always something that came up where I was like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. So yeah, I walked away flabbergasted. And like, as of right now, obviously we haven't seen very many movies for this year, so to say a list is very premature, but I would not be surprised if this was a top at least 3 movie of the year for me. Like,
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. I'll agree. I for sure see it making some form of the end of the year list for me, whether
Yeah.
I'm just blown away by tons of other stuff and this is just an honorable mention in the sci-fi genre, or whether it does make it
Yeah.
up there high based on what else comes out. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I do think it's overall a very solid sci-fi film, and it really stands out amongst its peers in recent years. I thought back to like 2020, and since 2020, I really don't know if I can name like 5 great sci-fi movies that have come out that I'm just like, are this is like a future classic in the genre,
Yeah.
and I think this one is
Yeah.
that. It takes advantage of kind of a weak current film landscape for the sci-fi genre. There's not a lot of great stuff happening in the superhero realm or in the Star Wars realm,
Right.
and this one kind of stands out as a great sci-fi thriller in that regard. Um, I do think there's a couple things that like I didn't love about the film, which is why it's not perfect to me. But I gave it an 8 because
Yeah.
it's super enjoyable. It's well worth the watch. I do think it could make an end of the year list for me. Um, and with all that being said, this comes out overall. It was just under an 8 out of 10,
Mm.
right about kind of where I expected it to be.
Yeah.
Like a great film with a few things that maybe I wish would have been done differently, but something I'm glad that we went and saw.
Yeah. Mine ended up coming out to like right above an 8. So we're
Right in the
right
same
about the
realm.
same. Yeah.
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 Uh, Let me, now that we've said this and we've kind of given it a lot of praise, as we were talking, I was looking at some of the information on the film, and currently this is rated as the 12th best movie ever on IMDb. Does that hold true for you? Do you think it's the 12th best movie ever, or do you just kind of
No.
feel like that's some recency bias?
It's got to be recency. Like, don't get me wrong, I still stand with it was a phenomenal film in my opinion. It no, it
Yeah,
it just really hasn't been out long enough. Like, as of right now, I wouldn't go see that movie again. Not because I don't want to or it's not great, but it's a long movie. I'm cool with where I'm at right now. Maybe I'll go see it in, like, I don't know, 4 months from now. Like,
sure, sure.
so yeah, that's crazy that it's 12th. I wouldn't put it up even in the top 20 as of right now. Like,
Yeah, I wouldn't really put it anywhere near that kind of rating. I
yeah.
think it's a great film so far in 2024.
Right.
um, but I don't think it's got any business like in the, like if you're top 25 in like public rankings, that's kind of like you're in goat debate territory for me.
Right.
Like if you're Saving Private Ryan, Gladiator, The Dark Knight, Shawshank Redemption, Godfather, Lord of the
Right.
Rings territory, you're kind of like in the realm where people are like goat debate. Like people are going to have you as their best movie ever.
Yeah.
Like you're going to talk to somebody and they're going to say this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. And I just don't feel like it's anywhere near that discussion for me.
Yeah.
But I'll stand by the praise. Like you said, I think it's a great film. And I'll leave it at that. I think
Yeah.
it's solid. I understand why it's having the cultural moment that it is right now because of what we've had from movies lately.
Yeah.
Like last year, you had Barbie Oppenheimer, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
And the year before that, I'm like struggling to think back that far as to like what we had. Like
Literally.
maybe that was the Batman or kind of thereabouts
Yeah.
ish.
But
But there's really been like not very few movies that have kind of given me enough reason to be like this kind of deserves a moment, and I do feel like this movie has that. So
right. Agreed.
well, Dune Part Two.